Welcome to Guide to IELTS. Let's solve Section 1, Passage 1 of Cambridge IELTS Book 16, Test 1 of IELTS Reading General Training. In the reading module of General Training, you have 3 sections. Section 1 and 2 have 2 passages each and Section 3 has 1 passage. When solving Section 1, it is recommended that you do not go through the passage first. No skimming required here. Instead, just look at the heading, see the question type, and depending on the question type, start looking for answers. The text that we have here says, helping pupils to choose optional subjects when they are aged 14 to 15, what some pupils say. Next, I look at the question types. It says, look at the 5 comments about lessons, for which comments are the following statements true. This falls under the question type, matching paragraph information or which paragraph contains the information. Usually, one of the 2 passages of Section 1 in Reading General have questions of this question type. It could be something like this. Another example of the same question type is this passage from Book 13, where a list of suitcases is given and you have to identify and match which of these statements is true for which suitcase. Whatever the information may be about, one thing that is common is that the names don't matter. In this case, you just have to identify that which statements matches which section, that is between sections A to G. And in the passage we are doing now, we have to identify from these different comments, which again have been marked A to E. So one thing I know is that the names of the students don't matter at all when looking for answers. In some of the question types in IELTS reading, the answers are usually in sequence, and that information impacts the way we look for answers. But in this particular question type, the answers cannot be in sequence. The very objective of this question type is to figure out where in the text the information is. When solving this question type, you can choose to read just one statement first, identify the key information in there and start scanning the passage. Or read more than one statement before you start looking for the answers. I suggest you try doing both in different tests and see which method works best for you. I usually try to read 3 to 4 statements, identify the keywords, keep them in mind, and start scanning the passage for that key information. I choose not to read all the statements because, in my experience, I'm not able to retain all that information, so it's a waste of time. Before you start reading the questions, make sure you read the instructions carefully. You're supposed to write the correct letter A to E. If the answer is Krishnan and you write Krishnan instead of A in your answer sheet, it would be marked incorrect. It also says here, you may use any letter more than once. In this case, it's kind of obvious because you have 6 statements and 5 comments to choose from. But this instruction is usually there even when you have 6 comments and 6 statements, which means there is a probability of one letter being used more than once and another one not being used at all. Now we start reading the questions. This pupil is interested in the subject despite the way it is taught. Despite is important to the understanding of this statement. What this statement is saying is that the subject is not taught properly and still this person is interested in the subject. What I'll be looking for when scanning the passage for this statement is any information about a teacher, about teaching, and wherever I find it mentioned, I'll read if there is any information about the teaching not being done properly. Second statement now, this pupil is hoping to have a career that makes use of the subject. So all this information is about which subjects these students want to choose, but it seems only one is going to mention that they want to have a career in that subject. We could find a mention of the word career. We could find that they say something like, I want to do this when I grow up, or I want to find a job in it. Third statement now, this pupil finds the subject harder than they expected. So I'll be on a lookout for mention of a subject being difficult or hard. And wherever I find this information, I'll see if the student mentions that they had not expected the subject to be that hard. Just having read these 3, keeping this key information in mind, I'll start scanning the passage. Scanning involves reading parts of the passage, reading phrases, that is 2 to 3 words at a time. I'm going to start with A. So Spanish, Important to learn foreign languages, watch video in class, Mr. Peckham, extra assignments, good for me, lazy. Just having read this part, I can see that there is no mention of a career. It doesn't mention that the subject is hard, but it does mention in class and Mr. Peckham. So there is some information about a teacher and a classroom. So I'm going to quickly read this part. And I'm very pleased when I can watch a video in class and understand it. So that's a positive thing. So the despite part doesn't work. Mr. Peckham really pushes us. So here, the use of the word push is not negative. It is not like I push someone and they fall down. To push someone is to try to persuade them to achieve something. It could mean to force someone, but usually it has positive connotations. So Mr. Peckham really pushes us and offers us extra assignments to help us improve. That's good for me because otherwise I'd be quite lazy. There is mention of the teacher here and the teaching method here, but it is all positive. There are two words which could have made you get the answer wrong. One is the word despite in the question and the other is the word pushes in the text. So A is not the answer to any of these three statements that we have. Let's start scanning B now. History, favorite subject, fascinating, learn about the past, relevant to what's going on in the world now, made me understand more about politics. Plan is to study history at university and maybe go into the diplomatic service so I can apply a knowledge of history. This is clearly talking about a career. Do higher studies in the subject and then diplomatic service here is talking about the career. I was expecting a word like job or I would like to pursue it when I grow up, but it just says go into the diplomatic service here. The answer to the second statement is clearly B. Starting with the C now. Thursdays, favorite days, computing, high spot of the week, love learning, began when 8. I didn't think I'd have any problem with it, but I was quite wrong. This sentence conveys that the student thought they would find it easy, but they were mistaken. It was not easy. After that, it says, when I leave school, I'm going into my family retail business. So clearly, this student is not planning to have a career in this subject, but C is the answer to the third one because the subject is harder than they expected. D now. My parents both work in leisure and tourism. Talked about their work a lot at home. Fascinating. Studying it at school. The teacher is very knowledgeable. Though I think we spent too much time listening to her. I'd like to meet people working in the sector. I have a feeling this could be the answer to the first one. Because it says something positive about the teacher, that the teacher is knowledgeable. But it seems that maybe she just talks a lot about the subject and doesn't give practical knowledge. Because with this word though, a negative is conveyed. Teacher is knowledgeable, but. So that's a negative. I'm not 100% sure though. So I quickly glance at E also. Always keen on art, optional subject. Afraid the lessons might be a bit dull. Our teacher gets us to do fun things. So in 3 of these 5 comments, teacher has been mentioned. In A, teacher has been mentioned, then in D, and then in E. But in A and E, the teacher is talked about in a positive sense. Continuing with E quickly, no risk of getting bored, and then some exhibition at school, and so on. So the answer to 1 is D. Even though I had just read 3 statements before starting, I had to scan through the whole text, so I already know quite a bit about it. The other 3 hopefully will be much easier to find. I'll start reading the other 3 statements now. This pupil finds the lessons very entertaining. The word I'm looking for is a synonym to entertaining. Something like it being fun. And I have just read E in which fun is mentioned, so it could be the answer. 5th one, this pupil appreciates the benefit of doing challenging work. Appreciates is a positive word. The student likes being challenged, being given difficult work or difficult assignment. There are quite a few words in this statement which can help me find the answer. Appreciate, benefit, the assignment being helpful. And challenging work obviously would refer to some assignment, some work that the student finds a little difficult. 6th one now, This pupil has realized the connection between two things. We're talking about some kind of a connection between two things. It could be any two things. So I'm a little unsure what kind of an answer I'm looking for here. But let's start scanning the passage for this again. For the fourth one, I'll straight away start going through E again because of this mention of the word fun here. Always been keen on art. Though I was afraid lessons might be a bit dull, I needn't have worried. Our teacher gets us to do a lot of fun things, so there's no risk of getting bored. Fun things are entertaining. At the end of the year, we put up an exhibition, looking forward to showing. I'm sure now that the answer to the fourth statement is E. Just quickly glancing at the keywords of fifth and sixth again, challenging work and some connection between two things. Let's start scanning. Important to learn languages. Pleased when I can watch a video in class. Mr. Peckham really pushes us. We have already discussed to push someone is to persuade them, to force them, to encourage them, to try harder to achieve something. Extra assignments help us improve. Good for me. Extra assignments is extra work. This phrase pushes us, helps us understand that this extra work is challenging. And helps us improve means that it is beneficial. So this is the word benefit here. And that's good for me because otherwise I'd be quite lazy. This means the student is appreciating this. We have found all of our key information being mentioned in some form here. So the answer to the fifth one is A. The last one now, some connection between two things. History. Fascinating to see how what we learn about the past is relevant to what's going on in the world now. This could be the two things that are being talked about the past and present. I'm not 100% sure, so I'll continue to scan. Made me understand about politics, and the rest we have already read, that the student plans to go to university. I think the only other place where two things are mentioned is in C, where programming is first mentioned and then retail business is mentioned. But it doesn't in any way mention that there is a connection between the retail business and programming. Answer to sixth one is also B. There's another phrase here that I would want to mention, although it didn't really help us find the answer. It is this phrase, high spot of the week, which means the most enjoyable or the most important part of something. So I could say the roller coaster was the high spot of my trip to the adventure park. Now that we have found all the answers, a couple of things of note. The names of the students do not matter at all, nor do the names of the subjects. It doesn't matter which subject who is studying. It is about what they say about the subject. Understanding of certain common words such as despite and though is very important to get the answers correct. Practice identifying the correct key information and practice scanning the passage, reading through phrases rather than reading the complete sentence to look for that key information. Hope this helped you. If you found the video useful, hit like, leave a comment, and do subscribe to our YouTube channel. All the very best to you.